Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new project. Now this project hopefully won't take as long as project LS400. Worst case scenario is this is a 2-week project. Let me introduce you to project People S. This is a 50cc scooter, it's a 4-stroke scooter. It's a Kymco People S, it's made in Taiwan. You see a lot of them down the road, and I bought this for my wife earlier this year for a couple of €100. And I already done some work to it. It needed a new front brake and it had needed an oil change and some maintenance. I mean, it was cheap and there was some work to it. And just when I thought I was finished, I discovered there's something seriously wrong with the engine. I'll go into that later in a second, but it just so happens to be that her daughter will turn 16 this week. This means that she is of legal driving age to drive a scooter when she gets a license for this thing, and hopefully that saves me a lot of car trips to school when the weather is too bad to go on the bicycle. Anyway, let me show you around what this is and what I have planned to do. So what I already did, the front shocks were leaking, so I pulled them apart, I repainted them. There are new seals in there, there is new fork oil in there, there is a new brake rotor, new brake pads, and all of that was rusty and the paint flaked off. But if you have a closer look, I cleaned the balls and they are a bit rusty, so I want to take care of that. But that's not in the scope of this project. This is the scope of this project, namely the engine. The problem is when I drove it home, I drove it for 50 kilometers, and the next day I wanted to do some basic maintenance, starting with an oil change. And when I drained the oil, there was way too little coming out, only a quarter, 25% what should be in there. So I topped it up, hoping everything would be fine, and it didn't do much damage to the engine. Changed the air filter, and when I opened this cover, the old air filter was completely clogged, and when I pulled it out, to my surprise, there was sand behind the filter. So sand made its way into the engine apparently, and that may be the cause of the problems we have at this moment. But all in all, this thing drives very nice, but the problem is, I'm going to turn it around and show you. Okay, I said it took a little persuasion to get her started. I had used some brake clean, spray it directly into the carburetor. She's been running for 20 seconds and that already is loads of smoke in here. So I'm gonna put the doors open and then start to take off stuff and take the engine apart. So the first thing that needed to come off was this bracket for the top case. Now I can take off this luggage rack, then I can take off these side panels, and then I have more access to the engine and take all the engine related stuff off. So that's the engine out, not without a struggle. The scooter tipped over, it's now on axle stands. Hopefully a bit more stable, at least we got the engine out. Anywho, let's get this on the workbench and start tearing this apart. So here it is on the bench, and the first thing I want to do is take the carburetor off. Okay, now we have access to the cylinder head. The cylinder itself is a little bit dirty over here, so I'm gonna get a vacuum cleaner, clean off all the loose dirt and get this line off. It doesn't look too bad. It's not as dirty as I expected. I don't recall I set the valve gap on this one. But anywho, let's see if we can struggle this off. Let's see how the timing chain comes out. There's the bridge with the rockers. It's a nice construction. Now I need to fiddle the camshaft out of the way. Have a closer look onto the bearings and the camshafts. There are slight wear marks, shiny spots on the tips of the cams, the cam lobes. Bearings seem to be in good condition, and when I look at this sprocket, it's in exceptional condition. With a little bit of help over here, over there. And now, there we are. Tiny, tiny little valves. And it's not too dirty on the inside. Put a piston in top dead center. And it comes off so easy. There is the piston. Oh yeah, and there's our problem. Well, there's our little piston. Gonna have a peek later on. Not sure if the camera picks this up. See if I can zoom in a little bit more. But over here you can see there has been a lot of blow by, and all these holes are clogged. So piston itself doesn't look too bad. It's much smaller than I expected. Let me get my needle nose pliers. Push it out. There it is. And there's our tiny little piston out. And on the top here, and on the top here you can see there's a whole lot of blow by. This is way too much given the mileage of this thingy. On the inside and bottom of the piston crown, also very, very dirty. And good thing we're taking this out. Gonna feel for big end play. Oh, I can tell you one thing, we're good in that respect, so that means that the engine doesn't need to come apart more than it is right now. Trick that I use to get these tops of the holders and these little collets that keep the valve spring on off. Here have I an extension socket. It's a 14mm and a little bit of paper inside here, and then give it a whack with a hammer, and there they are. Here are those tiny little clips. The camera wants to focus. Here they are. And over here we now can have a peek at those valve stem seals. This one is very loose. It can move it normally when they hold well. They they can keep the valve, but now when I push it in, the valve just falls through. So here's the intake valve, looking fairly nice and clean, but I already saw that the exhaust valve has a significant amount of buildup, and that tells me that the valve seal, the valve stem seal is leaking. Well folks, I've got the valve stem seals out. Here they are. They are hard, too hard for my liking. Now what I always do is check the valve guides. Just slide a valve in and just feel, and the valve doesn't want to wiggle, so that means there isn't too much clearance. That's one good. Let's try the exhaust valve, and that's also good. So got everything off. Now it needs to be cleaned. I think I'll take this home, and I have a wire wheel with a brass wire brush on there, and clean out this. I'm going to clean the valves, and then I have to figure out how to get this carbon buildup out of here and out of there. Maybe I'll find someone with an ultrasonic cleaner and throw it in that, give it a ZZ bath, and then this should be good to go back on. Nothing wrong with the cylinder head. I was a bit afraid there was too much play in those valve guides. That can also cause leakage of oil into the combustion chamber, and then you know what happens. So I'm going home, I'm going to get a cup of coffee, and I'm going to find out what a new cylinder kit for these things cost, and other gaskets and new valve seals. It's a little bit later in the day. I want to continue working on the swing arm, the transmission. I'm going to take this cover off. That gives me access to the final drive. I can hear a bearing noise in here. I don't like it, and I want to check how good or how bad the bearings are. And after I've done that, I'm going to clean this. When I have everything put together, I want to clean the entire assembly. This is not going to be a restoration, but I want to make it look a little bit neater than it is. I'm using my Parkside electric ratchet. As always, there's a lot of dust and debris from the drive belt in here. I got a new one, but this one doesn't need replacement yet. Not sure what I'm going to do. It's a 70mm nut on the front and a 40mm nut on the back. So here's the clutch assembly. A bit dirty on the inside. There we are. Now I only need to remove these 4 outer bolts. That one appears to be damaged. Those are good. So I got it turned around, checked once and twice to see if all bolts are out, and I think I should be able to tap it out. Yeah, that one's out too. Alrighty, that's the final drive out. This is the input shaft for the final drive. The clutch and the rear pulley goes on here, and this is the bearing with way too much play. Now the final drive has been draining. It's still a bit dirty on the inside. This is how it sits. Rear wheel goes here, and this is the rear of the scooter. It's a bit dirty, but this bearing and this bearing over here, all other bearings weren't affected. So all in all, there are 6 ball bearings in there, which I think is quite nice. I'm gonna clean this and put a new bearing on, and then this should be good to go. Okay folks, I forgot my microphone today. I continued working on the engine. I ordered new parts, most of them are in. Only problem is this gasket takes a couple of days, it wasn't available. And I also decided that I'm going to take everything apart and give everything a good clean. I mentioned earlier I didn't plan to do this, to make this a good running engine, nothing more, nothing less. But I'm taking this off, and next thing I need to do, shine a little bit more light, get all of these bolts out, and then I should be able to take this part of the crankcase off and split the entire engine and get the crankshaft out. We're a couple of days later and I finished cleaning all the casting parts, this central engine case. What I did, I cleaned it off with a bit of degreaser and a brass wire brush, and then I just put it into our dishwasher and it came out fairly nice. Now I am always very specific about being clean, but this had so much years of corrosion on there, it's the best I can do without sandblasting it, and I don't want to go that far. This over here is the new cylinder, it cost me 36 euros, that's what I ordered, and these are the valve stem seals, needed to be replaced. I also got new gaskets, but I got original Kymco gaskets. They are over here, just for the sump. And I'm waiting for the gasket that goes in the final drive. This gasket was 23 euros, so that's a bit on the expensive side. And these gaskets, together with new engine oil, cost me about 20 euros. Next up I have to assemble the piston rings, and I'm gonna put the piston in the cylinder barrel, then slide it over these studs. First up, it's important to take note of the order of the piston rings, which one is the top ring, which one is the second ring. The top ring is the chrome plated ring, the shiny one, and the second ring in this case is a black one with a sharp edge. And if you look up real close, the camera wants to adjust to this, there is a tiny little leather, and that's the top of the ring. I'm gonna assemble this off camera, it's a bit fiddly, and when I have done that we're gonna continue work. So I have the piston rings on. It was a bit of a hassle. You have the oil scraper ring. It's best to have this waved ring go in first, and then the super thin lower, super thin upper, then the second, and then the first ring. If you look up here, the spark plug is up here. There always is an offset in piston ring gaps. I usually, when I know that the spark plug is over here, I have the gap facing over here, exactly there, and the second one to the front, and the openings, although they are offset. When you have a one-piece oil scraper ring, I like to have that facing up, so it's closed around the bottom where it has to do most of the oil scraping action. So what I normally do, I put the wrist pin in from one side and slide the piston in the cylinder, and then slide it over the studs. But before I do that, I'm gonna lubricate the cylinder walls, so we have a nice amount of oil on there. Piston in a dry cylinder barrel. I usually use a hook to pull the timing chain in. Have the cylinder in top dead center, so I can see what I'm doing, hopefully. Engine around a bit, you can see that the cylinder is in. Now I have to align the connecting rod and the wrist pin. The second wrist pin clip needs to go in. I'm going to position it. Now I have to slide the piston in, just carefully. First let me grab the timing chain, pull it through. See how it moves. Well, I'm happy with that. Here I have the cylinder head, and I clean this just using warm water. Try to clean out the exhaust port. There was a lot of soot and carbon buildup coming out. Clean this, check for flatness. It's nice and flat. It's a fairly big lump of aluminium, and you compare it to the size of the combustion chamber, so these don't warp very easily. And these are single valve springs. I'm used to seeing a smaller spring inside there on the older Honda 4-stroke engines. So that's the cylinder head finished. Normally I would put in the rockers and the camshaft. And this engine I have to put this one in first, and then put in the camshaft and the rocker assembly, and set the timing at the same time. It's It's a little bit different than what I'm used to see from the Honda engines. I did a rebuild on that in this video over here. There it is, if you want to see that. I've done hundreds of them. So let's get the engine assembly up close. So that's the cylinder head ready to go back in. As you can see, I inserted a dowel pin over here because it was a bit out of shape. I tapped it on. Now I'll leave it in there. Now we should not forget the head gasket, which is a 2-layer metal gasket. It's a nice heavy construction for such a small engine. And there you are. It's the timing chain. This wants to slide over that lower dowel pin. It sure does. It's a little bit of persuasion, but there we are. Get my hook again. Go timing chain fishing. Okay, I had a little bit of trouble installing the camshaft and getting the timing right, but I really need to push down the cylinder head and the cylinder barrel. So I'm installing this bracket with the rockers, one rocker out. There we are. And this bracket, not sure if the camera picks it up, but it's marked EX exhaust. And that's the lower part that points down. So it's really nice to have such a smaller torque wrench at hand. Mine is a Kymco with a range. This is a 1/4" drive and it has a range of 5 to 25 Newton meters. If you don't trust yourself with tightening these things, you can easily under tighten them or over tighten them. Both aren't good. Get one of these. I'll leave the link down below in the description box. Up next is the timing chain tensioner. Now it's fully extended, so we have to push it back in. You can push on this side here. There's a tilting point. Push it in completely. Comes with a new gasket, this cylinder kit. In goes the gasket, the tensioner. And this is the spring that pushes down on the tensioner. Now I'm starting to push it in, you will hear it click. There it is. Now it's in contact with the guide on the inside. And just tighten it down. Alrighty. Let's put a little bit of oil on everything. Turn it around 2 or 3 times. I'm feeling if nothing is binding and I don't have the timing accidentally completely misaligned. Okay, that's good. one more rotation, so then the cam lobes are pointing down. And going to the T mark, I'm gonna check the valve lash. This one seems to be good. This one is also not far off.